next is Patrycja Krawczuk from USC, presenting on using Gantt charts and CNNs to study end-to-end scientific workflows and their anomalies through visual analysis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrycja, and I am a second-year PhD student in the SciTech lab. And today I will present our work in the area of anomaly detection in scientific workflows. First, the outline. I will motivate why this is an important problem, then talk about 1,000 genome workflow that we used for experiments. I will talk a little bit about the process of data collection, about the data set that we were able to collect, and methods that we use that are from the area of computer vision. Then I will speak a little bit about how we train the models and talk about our experimental results. And at the end, I will talk about the limitations of our current setup and the next steps to mitigate that. So let's start with the motivation. As many of you may know, the current modern cutting-edge scientific experiments are conducted on these complex, large-scale, distributed, high-performance infrastructures like DOE leadership computing facilities. And one of the latest examples of experiments that are run there is the study of population-level cancer surveillance. This is from Oak Ridge National Lab. And this problem of population-level cancer surveillance is critical for monitoring the effectiveness of public health initiatives. So thanks to scientists being able to have access to this large compute resources, they are now able to evaluate hundreds of thousands of pathology documents and identify on population level what are the current trends in cancer diagnosis and treatments. As you may imagine, this is a very important work that is only now possible thanks to this large facilities. And we want to support this work. And even though the DOE systems are designed with reliability in mind, they can sometimes experience different anomalies that range from subtle ones like network performance degradation to critical ones like file system integrity errors. And these anomalies can affect the performance of experiments in such ways that they can even lead to a failure of the experiments. And because we want to support the scientists, we would like to develop a system that can detect those anomalies, perform their root analysis, and then maybe in some point in the future be even able to automatically mitigate those anomalies so that the experiments do not fail. And in our lab to do those, to make the study, we perform experiments with the 1,000 genome workflow. The 1,000 genome workflow provides a reference human variation. It reconstructed the genomes of over 2,500 individuals across 26 different populations. And we ran this workflow on exogenous slides with 7 virtual machines. And in this very controlled environment, we introduced different types of anomalies. And the anomalies that we were interested in are, for example, CPU-related anomalies, where we introduce a stress tool that takes 2 or 3 cores on each worker out. Other anomaly is a hard disk drive anomaly that introduces a worker that does 50 to 100 megabytes of continuously continuous IO on each of the worker node. And the last one is the network packet loss stress tool. And here is a little bit of a diagram of how we are collecting our data and how we are preprocessing it. So we use Pegasus and Panorama 360, which is this end-to-end advanced monitoring framework that allows us to get a very detailed view of what is happening during the run of the workflow. And we have we developed a methodology that takes this data, the raw data, and visualize them as Gantt charts. Here is an example of a Gantt chart that has these 9 different stages that characterize the execution of the workflow. And our whole data set, we have 4 different classes. So we have some normal runs, we have runs with the anomalies that I mentioned before. And here you can have a view of our whole data set that consists of 1,000 images, because we executed the 1,000 genome workflow 1,000 times. And here you can see the distribution of how many instances of different types of anomalies we have in the data set. And now I will talk about the methods we use. So since we are having this traces visualized, so our goal was to use the recent advances in computer vision. And first approach is to create custom convolutional neural network, design it so that we can train it from scratch. And we created a convolutional neural network that has 5 convolutional layers and uses the leaky ReLU activation function. And our second approach was to use transfer learning. So we use some of the pre-trained models. That transfer learning is sort of a design methodology that transfers knowledge of a model that is trained on some large, well-annotated data set in one domain and transfers that knowledge to a target domain, in our case, the Gantt charts classification. And there are many different pre-trained models. We chose to investigate the following 3. We use AlexNet, which was developed in 2012 by Alex Krzyzewski. This workflow, this model has 61 million parameters. Then we also ran experiments on VGG16, which is a network that was developed by Visual Geometry Group in Oxford University in 2014. And it makes important changes to the AlexNet model by changing the sizes of those filters from large ones in AlexNet to much smaller in VGG16. And then there was this trend that networks were becoming deeper and deeper because that led to better performances. However, when researchers were coming up with more complicated, deeper models, they started to suffer from the issue of so-called vanishing gradient. And the ResNet architecture is one that utilizes these skip connections that help to mitigate this issue. And here is our diagram that shows our training setup. So we divide our data into training, validation, and test set. We run with different hyperparameters, and then we evaluate our models. So here are our results for a simple convolutional neural network that we created from scratch specifically for this problem. And we train it with and without data augmentation, since our data set is pretty small and these methods are very data hungry. We decided to try with some rotations, flips, shifts, and so on to increase the size of our data set. However, this did not lead to increase in performance. It actually led to a smaller accuracy. From the training curves, we can see that when the experiment is run with augmented data, the curves are a little bit smoother, but they still don't lead to any better performance. And this can be attributed to very small interclass differences. As you may have seen, those images from different anomalies are still very similar. It's very hard to say which corresponds to which anomaly. And here we have a matrix that shows how the accuracy at different anomalies. Then here are results for transfer learning. We can see that it takes much more epochs to train those larger models. And we can see that the pre-trained models were able to achieve 100% accuracy when detecting the CPU-related anomalies. And all of them can pretty well identify the normal runs without any anomalies. And the misclassification errors are most common between the normal runs and packet loss injected anomalies. And this can be due to very subtle differences that are hard to identify by our model, and perhaps more data would be able to fix this issue. This is sort of a summary of the results we achieve with and without data augmentation. So again, data augmentation did not have that much. We can see that it did not lead to deterioration of performance like we saw with a simple convolutional neural network trained from scratch. And this is because those pre-trained models are more robust to data transformations, as they have been trained or on very rich data sets. And what are the limitations of this work? So we train, all these experiments were performed only on the one specific workflow, so they are not able to generalize to other workflows. However, we are hoping to perform more experiments and see whether this method can generalize. And we are right now running more experiments on workflow mentioned earlier in the presentation by George, the CASA workflow. Right, thank you very much. If anyone has any questions?
Yes, I have one, if no one else is willing to ask one. So actually, it's also linked to the previous talk given by Shubham. Like in that case, it seems it's a typical case of when you can use a modality augmentation or something. So you could use, for example, like in addition of like the image you have, more data related to the computation, for example, the DAG or some structure. So do you think it's possible? And if yes, do you think you'll try to do it, or how do you think it will go?
Yes, I think it's totally possible, and this has been one of the venues that I want, one of the ideas that I wanted to pursue. Because, for example, this Gantt chart that we are seeing, it's very much its shape is constructed by the resources that are available and the DAG of the workflow. So if we could provide another vector with information about the resources available and then more information about the workflow itself, then it would be easier for the model to be able to understand how having different resources, the shape of the Gantt chart is influenced, and then understand what are the changes due to a different amount of computational resources and what are the changes due to anomaly. So having this more wider perspective would definitely help. And the big issue is, I guess, the availability of the data and how long it takes to perform those experiments to gather the data we have. Because if you are going to introduce more modulities, then you need even more data to train the model. But that's a great idea. Thank you.
Patrycja, I think it's more like a comment than a question. I was looking at the Gantt charts and thinking about predictions, of anomalies. So do you think the solution you have right now would be able to be running, while you have the workflow running at runtime and you're collecting data, so you're building up the Gantt chart? Do you believe you'll be able to predict if that Gantt chart is going to like an anomalous, behavior, or more it's like a regular execution? How do you see that?
I think so, because this is the data that we are using to construct the Gantt chart. It is time series data, so definitely it is possible to notice earlier. And I'm not sure that images would be the best way to go with this idea to do it online, because of like the partial image produces there's explosion of the different characteristics when you have only image of when the workflow is 30 seconds in, 60 seconds in. So this would be a very hard model to train. But maybe if you are going to use only numerical data, then it is more tractable to do. But definitely it is possible to notice those anomalies earlier and do this work online.